Welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we are going to be exploring the interesting world of insurance and software testing. You sent us some pretty interesting stuff about insurance domain testing, and honestly, it's a lot more interesting than it sounds. We're about to find out why this even matters to you, even if you've never coded before.
Yeah, that's true. I think most people just don't realize how much software is in like every part of the insurance industry, from just managing policies to, yeah, figuring out those premiums that we all hate looking at.
Okay, so it's more than making the websites and apps work, right? It's like, what even is domain testing when we're talking about insurance?
Well, think of it like this. You wouldn't really test a banking app the same way you'd test a game, right? And insurance software, well, it's got its own unique logic and stuff. So domain testing basically means you're making sure the tests are good for that specific software. Got to make sure it can actually handle real insurance stuff.
Oh, so it's a lot more than just making sure it doesn't crash when you use it.
Way more. Yeah, we're talking about making sure that like calculations are actually right, that it follows all the rules, and that all the important data is safe. Like it's really important to get it right. And this is where, people that actually know about insurance come in. They can help to design these tests and make sure they make sense for the industry.
That makes a lot of sense. I gotta admit, though, insurance can be like a total black box. Can you help us break it down? What are the main things this software needs to, like, do perfectly?
Okay, well, you've got all your different types, right? Life insurance, health, car, property. Each one has its own whole set of rules. So right away, you need different software for each one.
Right. So within each one, what are some of the things they have to test to make sure it works right?
One of the biggest things is how they process claims. Think about it. When you file a claim, you want that process to be accurate, efficient, and fair, right? So testing makes sure that the software checks the claims correctly, uses the right rules and policies, and then finally it pays out the right amount, without any problems.
That's definitely something we all care about. What about that whole premium calculation thing? That always seems so, I don't know, mysterious.
So that's where risk pooling comes in. You can kind of picture like this big pot of money where everyone with insurance puts in a little bit that's your premium, and then they use that money to pay out claims. So basically the risk is shared, which, makes it easier for everyone.
Okay, I get that. But how do they figure out my risk and my premium? That's where I get lost.
It's actually pretty interesting. They look at a ton of data, your age, your driving record, health records, and even like your location can matter. That's where the software is super important because it has to not only do all the math correctly, but also make sure everything is legal and fair.
So it's more than just getting the math right, it's making sure the whole system is fair to everyone.
Exactly. That's like a basic idea in insurance, and because they use more and more data and algorithms, it's even more important to test it.
Wow, I'm starting to see how it's not just about the app working. It's really about the whole insurance world, right?
Yeah, and that means testing a whole bunch of stuff. You've got systems for managing policies, actuarial systems, those do all that crazy premium math, and then a ton of security to keep all that data safe.
Speaking of actuaries, I've always wondered what they even do. What do they really do?
Okay, so actuaries are basically like data scientists, but for insurance. They're experts in things like statistics, finance, and, figuring out risk. They use all that to basically predict things like car accidents or health problems. And those models they make are used to decide premiums, reserves, and like the overall financial stuff.
So they're the ones who decide how much we pay based on how likely we are to cost them money.
Yeah, pretty much. And the software they use to do all this is super important. Testing just makes sure that it's all accurate, reliable, and follows all the like industry rules.
Wow, this is giving me a whole new understanding of how complicated this is. I'm guessing this means there are a lot of different types of tests they have to do.
Oh, yeah. That's where all those test cases you mentioned come in. They're like specific scenarios that check if the software is actually doing what it's supposed to. For example, you might have a test case just for checking the claims rules.
Okay, so what's that like in real life? Can you give me an example?
Sure. Imagine someone files a claim for a car accident. So the software has to figure out if the accident is even covered by the policy, then look at stuff like who was at fault, if there was anything already wrong with the car, and a whole bunch of other things, like this huge decision tree that the software has to get right every time.
So they test it by basically throwing all kinds of situations at it and seeing if it gives the right answer.
Exactly. And not just like a yes or no, but also the exact amount of money to pay out, considering all those deductibles and coverage limits and everything.
That's a lot to deal with.
Yeah.
I can see why the testing is so important. What about the tests that focus on, like, premiums? You mentioned something about 100% coverage and accuracy in calculations. That seems really important for, like, everyone who buys insurance.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Those tests are all about making sure things are fair and transparent. They try out different scenarios, like people with different risks, different levels of coverage, all the add-ons, and they check if the premium is right each time.
So they're not just checking if the final number's right, but if the way they got there is, like, correct and follows the rules.
You got it. They look at all little pieces of the calculation, making sure every step follows the regulations and those actuarial standards. No hidden fees or anything sneaky like that.
It's like a safety net to make sure no one is being tricked.
Exactly. And those tests are always changing too, because new things keep popping up, like how climate change affects property risks, or telematics and car insurance, or even using wearable tech to see how healthy you are.
Oh, speaking technology, our source material also mentions mobile app functionality.
Hmm.
That's huge these days, right?
Oh, yeah, it's huge. Everyone wants to do everything on their phone, including managing their insurance. So testing has to cover all sorts of phones, operating systems, even different network connections. You got to make sure the app is easy to use and works perfectly no matter how someone is using it.
And I bet security testing is a big deal too, with all that personal data flying around.
Definitely. Cybersecurity is like the top priority in this industry. Any little weakness could be a disaster, with data breaches, identity theft, and all that bad stuff.
So how do they actually make sure these systems are really secure? What kind of testing do they do?
Well, they basically try to attack the system like hackers would. They look for weaknesses and try to exploit them all in a safe environment, of course. It's kind of like ethical hacking, but just for insurance software.
So they're hiring the good guys to think like the bad guys.
Exactly. They have to think ahead and make sure the system can handle any attack. And it's not a one-time thing either. Security testing has to happen all the time because there are always new threats and vulnerabilities popping up.
Wow, this is really eye-opening. I never realized how much goes into keeping our data and our money safe.
And we're just scratching the surface. There's a lot more complexity, like making sure everything follows all the regulations. Insurance is super regulated, and software has to follow a ton of rules.
Yeah, I bet there would be big problems if they messed that up.
Definitely. Testing has to verify that the software follows all those laws, from data privacy to consumer protection. It's a really big job.
And then you have all the connections to other systems like banks, healthcare providers, and even government agencies. It's like this giant web of connections, right?
Yeah, it is. And each connection could have problems. Testing needs to make sure all those connections are smooth, secure, and reliable. Imagine the mess if your insurance company couldn't talk to your bank or your doctor's office.
That would be a nightmare. So it's not just about testing the software itself, but the whole system it's connected to.
Exactly. They look at the big picture and consider all the different systems and how they depend on each other. And it doesn't stop there. We also have to think about how technology is always changing.
Right. Something that worked 5 years ago might be totally useless today. So this testing never really stops.
It's a constant cycle. As technology gets better, there are new risks, new regulations, and even people's expectations change. Testing has to keep up with all of that.
So it's like a game of cat and mouse trying to stay one step ahead.
Pretty much. It's a really cool field for anyone who likes to solve problems, think critically, and, stay ahead of the game.
It definitely sounds like it's always changing. Okay, so we've talked about a lot today. We've gone way deeper than just insurance software and really looked at how important domain testing is for making sure everything is accurate, fair, secure, and follows the rules.
Yeah, it's really crazy to think about all the things they have to test. This deep dive has been super interesting. It's shown us a whole world that most of us never even think about. And honestly, we're only scratching the surface. The future of this whole insurance domain testing thing is going to be even more interesting and challenging too as technology keeps changing the industry.
That's a good point. What about the future? What are some of the biggest trends you see changing the whole insurance domain testing world?
Well, one of the huge things is AI, artificial intelligence and machine learning. They're using it more and more in insurance for stuff like personalizing policies, figuring out risk, and even catching fraud.
So how does that change how they do the testing?
Well, it makes it a lot more complicated. Like, how do you even test something that's always learning and changing? How do you make sure the AI is being fair and not biased? Those are some of the big questions testers are dealing with right now.
So AI in insurance is making things a lot harder, but it's also opening up new things for domain testers to figure out.
For sure. It's like they have to come up with totally new ways to test things. Plus, there's all this data that insurance companies are collecting now. I mean, we're talking about everything from how we drive to what we do on social media.
Right. I've heard about some car insurance companies using, I think it's called telematics, to like track your driving and change your premiums based on that.
Exactly. And while this data can make insurance better and more personalized, it also brings up a lot of privacy questions. Testing has to make sure that the companies are using this data responsibly, ethically, and following all the data privacy rules.
So domain testers aren't just worried about if the software works, they're also thinking about if it's ethical and fair, which is pretty important.
Yeah, it's a huge responsibility, and it's only going to get bigger as technology keeps advancing.
This whole deep dive has been really eye-opening. We learned that insurance domain testing is so much more than just making sure an app works. It's about keeping our data safe, making sure premiums and claims are fair, and in the end, protecting us financially.
And as technology keeps changing the insurance world, domain testers are going to be even more important. They'll be the ones making sure everything is high quality, secure, and ethical in an industry that's always changing.
So next time you're dealing with your insurance company, whether it's online, on an app, or even talking on the phone, remember all those people working behind the scenes, the domain testers, who are making sure everything runs smoothly, securely, and that you can trust them.
And hey, maybe this deep dive made you a little bit interested in this whole domain testing thing. It could be a pretty cool career path.
Until next time, keep learning.